Senator Lindsey Graham represented his home state of South Carolina in the Senate for 23 years. Congressman Nancy Mace posted this tribute this morning. She wrote in part, quote, "South Carolina lost a giant last night." She went on to say, quote, "We did not always agree, but no one ever questioned his love for South Carolina or the fight he brought to every room he walked into." Congresswoman Nancy Mace joins us now from Charleston. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. Lindsey was elected to the House in 1995, which when I checked my records here, you were 17. So Lindsey Graham has been a force in South Carolina politics your entire adult life. I know this is a hard day for you, for everyone in South Carolina. Just give me your gut emotional place right now.
Yeah, the year I was dropping out of high school, he was being elected to Congress. Number one, I have to tell you, Garrett, I've been talking to people all across the state and across the country right now. We're all in shock. We're stunned. Nobody thought this could happen anytime soon. He was 71. He was healthy. We all thought. And so we're just really in a state of shock this morning, but also at the same time reflecting on his legend. He was funny. He was hard. He was smart, brilliant, and he knew how to fight. I mean, when you looked at what he did when Kavanaugh got ambushed in the Senate confirmation hearings for him as justice, he went in there and turned it all around. His constituent services are unlike anything other I've ever seen in the history of South Carolina. Anytime I needed something that I couldn't deliver, I would always go to Senator Graham's office. That's who I sought if I needed money for roads or bridges or dredging along the coast. I mean, he was just a force to be reckoned with. And that's what we're grappling with today. He had the seniority, he had the fight, he had the history, the smarts. He was very close to the president. And by God, whether you loved him or hated him, you knew that he loved South Carolina. You knew that he loved his country. You knew that he served his country in uniform. You knew that he had the president's ear. And you knew that Lindsey Graham could deliver no matter what.
You have a fair amount of experience with the president and his attitudes and how to try to adjust to them or sometimes be a victim of his political attitudes. How do you think Senator Graham navigated them?
Well, I mean, he was one of the smartest men in the room. And I will tell you, Garrett, when I first got elected to the House of Representatives, the first meeting I took was with Lindsey Graham. We shared a glass of Riesling wine. He loved wine. And I sat there and I listened to him give me advice. And he became sort of a mentor for me. And, you know, some of these fights we get into can be very hairy at times. And he was very good to have my back when I needed it. And I had his back, too. I mean, he was a mentor for not just me, but a lot of us on the Hill on how to navigate some of the traps that you run into and how to be successful. And really, at the end of the day, he always said, working for the people, our constituents, if you deliver for them, you're delivering for your state, you're delivering for your country, and nothing else matters. And that was the best piece of advice he ever gave me.
And Congressman, you can always call me Major. Remember that. So I know this is a tough day for South Carolina, but you also know, as I do, that politics is a never-ending business. It's a constant and relentless treadmill. Yeah. And there are dates approaching, and there are considerations that Governor Henry McMaster is making today. He has to. He doesn't want to. He's forced into them, but he's going to have to make an appointment. There's Politico reporting already saying that there's an effort to make sure you're not the appointed person to fill Lindsey Graham's slot. There's a filing deadline that's going to open July 21st for the 6-year term. What is your attitude at this moment, this hour, Congresswoman Mace, about filing and possibly seeking that full term?
Well, number one, we're all mourning the loss of Lindsey Graham, and I want South Carolina to have that time to do that. I actually am not seeking the appointment, the interim appointment for the next 6 months. I texted the governor of South Carolina this morning, one, expressing my shock, my condolences and mourning. But also I told the governor that perhaps he should appoint himself as the interim senator between now and January 3rd to hold that in place so that we can have this election. You're right. Filing is July 21st. There'll be a special election on August 11th. I would be remiss if I didn't at least consider it. But right now, my focus is going to be on South Carolina and mourning the loss of, I think, one of the greatest senators we're going to have in our history. And then I'll make some considerations to what I do going forward. There may be a lot of people in this. There may not be, but we're talking about a 3-week race for the United States Senate if we're talking about July 21st to August 11th. It's a very short period of time.
I asked this question to Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois. I want to pose it to you, Congresswoman Mace. What will you miss personally most about the death of Senator Graham?
Senator Graham was a fighter. He was a force to be reckoned with, and he mentored myself and a lot of other people. And I think his wisdom and how he was able to navigate many different presidencies and still deliver for his hometown constituents in South Carolina, that'll be a feat very few people can achieve. And that's his legacy.
South Carolina Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace, thank you.
Joining us now is Republican Congressman William Timmons. He's represented South Carolina's 4th congressional district since 2019. Congressman, good morning, and my condolences to you. How are you making sense of this loss today?
Good morning. It really doesn't seem real. The senator was such a huge force in South Carolina, in the country, and in the world, and it really is just a huge loss, and we're doing our best to celebrate his life. I've talked to a lot of his friends and his team, and it's just very sad. It's very sad.
Yeah, I know that the shock is still sinking in for so many people. We're looking at a tribute you posted online. This was lengthy. You said it wasn't unusual for you to be playing golf with the senator and him getting calls from a world leader on some major issue. From your view, what made him such an effective deal maker, especially with foreign policy?
He really was a friend and a mentor, and he taught me the value of earning the respect and the trust of his colleagues on both sides of the aisle. And he extended that overseas. He developed relationships with world leaders that made him even more effective. And it didn't matter who was in the White House. It didn't matter if it was a Republican or a Democrat. And he made sure that he was representing South Carolina to the best of his ability. He was in every major decision room in the last few decades. And I mean, it's just a huge loss for our state.
We heard President Trump say that he would lean on Senator Graham if the president needed help from Democrats. So the president said that he was a man who helped him reach across the aisle, and he's being fondly remembered for that. But the question now becomes, who fills that void? Are you concerned it might be challenging for lawmakers to find bipartisanship without such a longtime advocate?
I think the legacy that he left is going to resonate with the people that he cared most about. And I think that that's going to have a lasting impact. That's going to be his legacy. The willingness to put aside partisan politics to figure out a way to solve the problem that the American people need solved. And so right now, we're just going to celebrate his life. We're going to miss him, and we're going to figure out how to move on, because he would want us to get back to work. He would, yeah. But we're going to celebrate his life, and we're going to remember him and just be with his family and his team in this very, very tragic time.
And in your note, you mentioned, as you said here, that he was a mentor to you. You've had conversations, you've received advice. There's plenty of laughter between you two. Are you considering to replace Senator Graham?
Right now, I'm just celebrating his life. I think it's premature to talk about what's next, but obviously the president has a huge role in that. The governor has a huge role in that. There's discussion about having the interim being his sister, which I think would be very fitting for his legacy. Darlene is a wonderful, wonderful human, and she would there would be a lasting legacy for Senator Graham if that's who the governor chose. But again, that's his decision, and we'll see where that goes. And then obviously the president has a huge role in what goes on from there. So we're going to pick up the pieces and we're going to get back to work. But for now, we're just going to celebrate his life.
Congressman William Timmons, thank you very much for being with us today, and our condolences once again.
More reaction to the sudden death of Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. He was 71 years old. Senator Tim Scott was a close friend of Graham, serving alongside him for more than 13 years, both of them, as you know, representing the great state of South Carolina. Senator Scott, thank you so much for joining us. I know this is a very difficult time for you. I know it must be shocking and emotional, but I've been watching you all weekend, and I hear you say repeatedly that the country might have lost a statesman, but you have lost a friend. And I want to concentrate on the friend part for a second. Connect the dots with us about who he was as a person and why you considered him a friend.
Well, thank you, Gail, so much for starting there with the personal opportunity to share the love I have for my good friend, Lindsey Graham, and the love he had for his family is really the most important part of his journey. It started as he's a 19-year-old kid at the University of South Carolina. His mother dies of cancer, and 15 months later, his dad has a massive heart attack, and he's gone. And Lindsey actually adopts his 13-year-old sister And that misery and painful journey leads him to the United States Senate, and it makes him very sensitive to people. He loves bringing people together. I remember him at my wedding, Gail. He was talking to this little kid named Case, and he was just making a joke that for a 3-year-old, he had no expectation that that kid would ever see Social Security, and all the adults just laughed, and you just felt people getting a little closer even at my wedding as Lindsey became the comedian in tow. So it was just so fantastic to have that in the Senate with us, but also as a friend, just someone who always was bringing people together through humor.
You know, it's interesting to see the praise coming in from both sides of the aisle about him. I've heard people say he was able to do things that other senators could not. You know, that regardless of how you felt about some of his positions, there was always a way that you could talk to Lindsey Graham. You think that that's true?
Gail, it's 100% true. One of the things I'd say is his wit and his humor brought the Senate colleagues together. Whether it was Cory Booker or Bernie Sanders, Lindsey Graham would look for something in common. And if they could find it, he'd work with them on it. And sometimes he'd be criticized for crossing the aisle. But Lindsey Graham was oblivious to that kind of criticism because he felt like if it was good for America, just do it. And we need more folks in public office who appreciate the value of friendship and common ground. You do not have to surrender your values to find a path forward. Lindsey never did. He never surrendered his values, but he always found the path that led to a better America. And sometimes it didn't work out, but he didn't care. He'd come right back to it again. And that really is why so many people have great passion for him, sometimes against him, but 90% of the time for him. And that made him not only a great legislator, it made him a good statesman for the country.
Senator Scott, this is Jolene Kent, and I was just wondering what you thought was on Senator Graham's mind in these final days. He was working right up to the end. He was in Ukraine. He had spoken with the president. What do you think was going through his mind?
Well, there's no doubt that Lindsey Graham, as a former JAG officer, 30 years plus serving in the military, really loved foreign policy, and he believed that America had a responsibility to solve problems here at home, but around the world. And so the Ukraine conflict there, he had spent at least 10 visits to Ukraine because he wanted to save as many lives as humanly possible. He wanted to stop the aggression of Russia. He wanted us to resource Ukraine and make sure that as quickly as possible that the resolution would come to the table. He felt like he was very close. When you hear him talk to the president on Friday, he felt like there was a deal that was imminent that could help save more lives. And talking to Lindsey behind the scenes, he always talked about the importance of peace. He would use strength to get there, but he was always focused on peace.
Senator Scott, we only have 30 seconds here. I just wanted to know, I know it's rather soon, but curious to know, he had 4 terms in the U.S. Senate. Who would you like to see run for his seat and take on his legacy?
Well, I think there are a number of people that could do so. I will say I hope that the governor will put a placeholder and let the voters decide. And so I think in the next several hours or next day or so, we'll figure out who that person is. I love Trey Gowdy, and Jim DeMint has been in the conversation. His sister would be a wonderful placeholder as well. So we've got lots of candidates who could hold the place so that the voters decide. And remember, the election starts August the 11th in South Carolina. So 3 weeks from now, we'll have a primary process.
The clock is ticking. That's the first time I've heard his sister in the mix. Thank you very much, Senator Tim Scott.
You never know.
You never know. You're absolutely right about that. We thank you for your time this morning.
I want to bring in South Carolina Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. Thank you, Madam Lieutenant Governor, for joining us. I know the news probably shocked you like it did all of us. I remember I just glanced at my phone very early morning, Sunday morning, and I saw this notification, and my brain didn't register it because you just don't think of Lindsey Graham and death in the same sentence. What was it like for you when you first heard that the senior senator from South Carolina had died?
Well, first off, thank you for this wonderful tribute to the senator. He is such a servant leader, and I was woken up in the middle of the night to the news, and I really couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. Watching him on TV, he was so active and so involved in what was going on across the nation, across the globe. It was shocking to hear what happened, but this is an entire state in mourning for sure.
And I just want to mention as well, because you posted this tribute online saying in part, quote, "We will remember Lindsey for his friendship, his loyalty, and his unwavering commitment to the people that he loved." Here's a statement on your screen now. So in your view, what made him such a powerful politician?
You know, because he always did reach out to the people. And, you know, I think you heard Senator Scott, I kind of saw a few minutes ago showing his remarks. And, you know, Lindsey wasn't afraid to do what he thought was right. Even if he got criticism, it didn't matter where it came from. He did what he felt was right for not just the people of South Carolina, but for everybody across this amazing country that we live in. And, you know, Senator fought very hard for this state. And, you know, when you talk about all the things that South Carolina has been able to say they're prospering from, the deepest, widest port on the East Coast, Lockheed Martin coming here, dollars for infrastructure, that was Senator Graham always in there fighting for what we knew we needed here as a state. And then you take that to a bigger platform, and he was fighting for the American people, making sure that he put the best judges in place. You know, making sure that, you know, he fought for policies he thought was going to be good for this country and his people. And so he was a friend to all. Not every, you know, you can go back through time. Not everybody always agreed with him, but at the end of the day, you could never doubt where his loyalty was.
So one thing about Senator Graham is many people are remembering him for his willingness to work across the aisle. And I sort of think, Madam Lieutenant Governor, that we probably won't see a senator cut in the same mold as Lindsey Graham for a while. This is a man who worked very closely with Democrats, the famous Gang of Eight back in 2013 that passed significant immigration reform. He was a very staunch defender of Ukraine and a staunch anti-Putin Republican. We've seen within the Republican Party people who are not in that same vein. Also, he was somebody who would be willing to sit down with somebody on the other side of the aisle to work on things, for even example, climate change, which is something that he was one of the few Republican senators who did acknowledge climate change was real. How difficult do you think it will be now for your party to find somebody, and we should mention that you're somebody who is potentially being mentioned as filling his seat, but do you think we'll see another Lindsey Graham in this modern era?
You know, in a certain, yes, I hope we do. And I came out of the business sector. And so the political world was very new to me when I became lieutenant governor. But I always believed in my heart that when we run as Republican or Democrats, but when we serve, we should serve all the people that we represent. And it doesn't mean you always have to agree with them. And I think that's something we have to put back in perspective. You don't always have to agree with people you're listening to. But when you're elected by all, you should listen to all. And I think, you know, back in the day, everybody talks about Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill and how they would come together. I do believe the problem is now as Republicans and Democrats, we're so far apart. We used to be a lot closer together. In a bigger picture, we agreed on where we wanted to see the country to go. We just probably had different paths. And now we're just so far apart, it's hard to come together. But I hope that, you know, because what I've heard from the campaign trail, what I've heard from my time as lieutenant governor is people want to see a government that's working. And, you know, business people will tell you, you have to sit at the table with everybody, even if you don't like what they have to say, and that makes for success. So I'm hoping, I have hope. I always have had hope that, you know, we will come back together and do the will of the people and do it in the right way so America continue to grow and prosper and be something that, you know, we leave to our children better than we found it.
You know, Vlad alluded to this a moment ago, but obviously you've been named as a potential top contender for this now vacant Senate seat. Are you considering a run here?
You know, I was really a little bit saddened yesterday that so many people, instead of talking about the amazing work of the senator, were talking about who was going to be next to follow. And I realize a lot of that is politics, and the business of the people have to keep moving on. You know, that's not something that, you know, I want to focus on the senator right now and, you know, sending love and prayers to his sister, who is a wonderful person and has, you know, was so close to her brother. I think that's what we should focus on right now, and talking about the wonderful things he did. He's left an amazing legacy, not just to the state of South Carolina, but to the nation.
And yet, Madam Lieutenant Governor, you successfully campaigned to become the next governor of the state of California. There are some in your state who were not successful, who are because, as you know, this has to happen in August. So we're just a couple of weeks away, given the way that primaries work in South Carolina. You were very successful. You received the endorsement of President Donald Trump. How important was having his endorsement to you coming out on top in that primary for the governor's seat? And would you then seek his endorsement if you were to throw your hat in the ring for Senator Graham's seat?
The president is, he's our president. He leads our party. Obviously, he throws a lot of weight in voters and Republican voters in a primary, especially. So I think we're going to take it one step at a time. I know that there are people that ran against me for the governor's race that have already thrown their hat in. Again, I said it was kind of disheartening to me that, that we'd be talking about succession instead of talking about the legacy of Senator Graham. But there'll be a time for that. But today is celebrating what a great life the senator has given to this nation.
Okay, we appreciate your time today, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. Thank you.
Thank you so much.